So I'm going to be talking about the importance of getting agile or dying. I know that sounds pretty extreme, but the truth is that in tech, you're either growing or dying, and you really can't grow today unless you're agile, unless your growth team or marketing team is pretty agile about getting in and out of opportunities. You're going to have a hard time growing. So the reason that you need to be agile is that new opportunities are dying, or new opportunities are emerging all the time, and if you aren't quick about getting into them, they're on the process of disappearing, and existing opportunities are always dying. And so the shelf life of ways to grow your business, they're constantly disappearing. So you need to be really agile about moving in and out of opportunities. And if you have a growth team, it's actually pretty hard. So when you're small, you're just an individual. You can keep it all inside your head. You can try a little of this, a little of that, move in, move out really quickly. But as you add more people, it gets really hard to actually start to steer that ship and start to move in and out of opportunities. And even if you're a fairly new company who's just recently reached product market fit, the truth is that you actually have kind of a big team when it comes to growth. And that's because growth is a company-wide initiative. It's not something that just one person or two people are doing. It's something that, even if they're not consciously doing it, everyone across the company is affecting growth. So poor success and support, you're going to have a hard time onboarding people. Product is huge for retaining people. So if you take Dave McClure's Pirate Metrics, it sits across multiple groups within the company. And ideally, you have a growth team who can help to coordinate those efforts and kind of be that cross-functional team that helps everybody stay on the same page. But it's not easy. So keeping everybody on the same page is a challenge that pretty much every company has. And as you grow, it gets harder. So again, things are constantly changing, so your objectives should be changing. So if today what you're focused on it should be different than what you're going to be focused on in a couple of weeks, because new opportunities are emerging, whether they're opportunities within your funnel for improvement or they're new channel opportunities. Your objectives about how you should be focusing your team are constantly in flux. And so it's hard to keep the team on the same page about what those opportunities are. And as that happens, if part of the team's pulling in one direction and part of the team's pulling in another direction, they're going to be out of sync. There's going to be a lot of wasted effort. And so it's really important to try to keep everybody in sync, but it's hard. And what I've found as, generally, when you're an individual marketer, so at a lot of companies, I started as the first guy. So at Dropbox, I was the only solo-focused person on marketing. Not too hard to keep everybody on the same page. That logged me in. I started as the first guy. Eventually, we had 15 people on the team. We had another 15 open headcount. And so I wasn't really focused on growing the business anymore. I was focused on helping keep everybody on the same page, trying to learn what the heck is that person doing, what's that person doing. And so more and more of my time got pulled away from actually executing growth and marketing. And so I wasn't stepping back and actually looking for leverage in the business. And where should we really be focusing our efforts? And that's hugely important. So I want to take an opportunity. This is kind of I think I'm the first speaker to test the system on this. And considering my upside down slide, I'm a little nervous about how this is going to work. But there's a poll question that you guys have an opportunity to try to answer. And it's really, in your business, what is the biggest hurdle preventing your marketing team from being more agile? So somebody controlling the slides who wants to pop up the results on there. So it's basically, we should get not a commitment to driving growth, or not a commitment to running enough experiments, not focusing testing efforts on the highest leverage opportunities, or the team is not in sync around goals and results. So try on your app. We'll see if this works. I'll give you a minute to give it a shot, and we'll just kind of help us all understand where each of us are maybe having a little bit more trouble in being more agile. You guys able to find it on the app? Thumbs up if you are. What's that? click on live voting. I think you got that little bit.ly link up there if you haven't found it yet. And is it going to populate on this slide? Okay. The risks of early adoption. We'll see how this goes. All right. So right now, it looks like not committed to running 3+ tests per week. I'm going to explain the importance of that in a minute because there's a couple of companies, one of mine included, where we learned when you actually quantify a testing goal, how that impacts your growth. So, but one of the points that I talked about was that when the head of growth and marketing gets kind of caught into trying to manage the growth process, they get really distracted from the opportunity to actually look for leverage within the business. And so I'll give you an example from LogMeIn around the importance of that. So like a lot of you, I got into LogMeIn. We were just kind of early with customers. We were just getting started, and it turned out that what I wanted to do was go out into the channels and start acquiring customers. And so I had my early team. We started buying some ads, started doing some testing, found a few things that worked, and then we quickly hit a wall where we couldn't spend more than $10,000 a month with a positive return on investment. So as soon as we went over $10,000, we were losing money. But when we actually studied what was going on, we realized that the majority of people who signed up for the product weren't actually using it. They didn't even use it once. So there was a big activation issue. And when we actually dug in and started trying to fix that friction, we spent a few months focused on that friction. And that might have seemed like a waste because we should be out there building channels and getting users familiar with it. What we actually did, though, is that we were able to improve the number of people who signed up and then actually used the product by about 10x. And what that meant from a channel perspective was that $10,000 where we were previously capped now scaled to $1 million a month with a positive return on investment. And so today it's a $2.5 billion company. I promise we would not have gotten there on being able to spend $10,000 a month. So that we didn't have any new creativity around how to grow the business. We just fixed what was holding growth back. And so that's what I was talking about in terms of finding leverage. So a specific example there was we had one channel that sent 200,000 new people a day and had a 10% sign up to actually to use the product. There's a free product. And so 20,000 new people a day coming in and signing up, really great opportunity, really excited about the channel. But again, same thing, 90+% people not using the product after they signed up. And we just asked this question, why did you sign up and not actually download the product? And what we found was that, and this is after we did a bunch of A/B testing trying to fix it. So big red, free download, maybe double the size of the button, all these things. But when we asked them why they signed up and didn't download, they didn't believe it was free. And so after all this A/B testing that didn't move the needle, our next A/B test tripled the sign up to download rate because we gave them a choice: download free version or download trial of paid version. And once they had that choice, the free version was more credible, and we made that channel viable for us. So it's tests like that across the entire funnel that gave us the opportunity to grow that business. So we kept finding the leverage points where we could make it more growable. So really, how do you manage that testing? What do you do to manage that testing? A weekly meeting is really important for managing that testing. So that's where you keep everybody on the same page. That's where you're able to make sure that everyone knows what is the objective that we're focused on today. How are we progressing against that objective? What are our overall KPIs, and how are we progressing against those? And this is an execution meeting. So as marketers and growth people, it's really easy for us to get into brainstorming mode and start to, maybe if we did this and maybe an idea here, but that's a meeting that goes for easily a couple of hours, and you start losing people along the way. They stop wanting to come to that meeting. So you need to be super systematic about this meeting. It's not for brainstorming. The rest of the week is brainstorming. This is a meeting where you're getting stuff done and you're focusing on objectives and how are we progressing against those objectives. So really what you're doing in there is you're executing a growth process, and that process, so every growth team has some kind of a growth process that looks like this, that essentially they're running analysis to find high leverage opportunities, they're setting objectives against those opportunities, they're generating ideas. So what are some things that we can do to actually reach those objectives, prioritizing the implementation of those ideas, the testing of those ideas, running analysis, and just continuing to repeat that model. So the analysis part really starts with understanding your growth model. So this can get kind of complicated. We'll have some time for questions at the end, so if somebody wants to dig into this, you can. But really, the growth model is basically the variables that work together to drive growth in the business. So the best way to think about growth is a single metric that really reflects what's happening, what is progress, and that single metric should not just be a vanity metric that says we're getting a bunch of signups, but should be somewhat reflective of the benefit that users are getting. So the impact of your solution on the market, and your growth model is really how do the various pieces work together to move that metric in the right direction. And so again, Dave's R framework is a good way to think about that. So acquisition, activation, retention, and referral. How can you experiment within those things to move that growth metric forward? I like to think of it as a diagram, and we're all familiar with LinkedIn. So a good way, we actually did a big growth study on LinkedIn at GrowthHackers.com. So if you go there and look at growth studies, you'll find a several page breakdown of how we think LinkedIn is growing, and these are kind of the highlights. So on the acquisition level, you've got SEO. Every time people create a new profile, it's getting picked up in SEO. International expansion is a big part of their growth, and then invites. So every time someone's signing up and inviting other people, they're helping to spread it. The activation or aha moment is when you set up your profile and you first go out and connect with a few other profiles. Then you kind of get what it's about. Over time, the ongoing benefit you're getting that drives retention is, oh, okay, I'm able to keep in touch with all of these work people, and as I'm building these connections, I'm inviting more people, I'm re-engaging existing people, making it more valuable for everybody. The North Star metric then is profile connections, and revenue is really correlated with those profile connections. So being able to break this down gives you the opportunity to try to find high leverage opportunities within there, and then you want to set your objectives around those high leverage opportunities. So a lot of us can kind of get pulled into the analysis paralysis kind of side of things. This analysis can get really interesting, but analysis doesn't drive growth. What drives growth is testing, a discovery, and once you've discovered what drives growth in the business, then continuously executing those things. So the power of testing, I think, is really well demonstrated with Twitter. So Twitter, we all know they've kind of stumbled with growth recently, but they actually did in 2010 as well. And at that time, they were only running 2 experiments per month, and a new VP of product came in and cranked that experiment rate up to 10 per week. And you can see it was actually almost completely flat in the last quarter of 2010. They upped the experiment rate, and they had very consistent, steep growth after that for a long time. So we did it at our own team at GrowthHackers. I kept getting busy with other things and kept saying to the team, guys, we need to be experimenting more, but there wasn't enough experimentation going on. People thought we were experimenting, but when you really step back and counted how many we were doing, it wasn't very many. And so I just boiled it down to, we need to run 3 experiments per week. Every week we don't, we fail. Every week we do, we did the inputs that will ultimately lead to helping us grow the business. And as soon as we started quantifying our experiments, growth turned the corner and was consistent for a long time. So I think it's really important to make sure that you set some goals around growth. So, but of course, you're not just running tests, ideally, you want to make sure that those tests are directed toward the best opportunities for growth. And that's this idea of setting objectives. And so if you can set an objective where you're defining the time frame, and so this can be kind of a roadmap, as George was talking about in the last session, but setting objective where you maybe are a 14-day period or a 45-day period, but essentially saying, here's our baseline metric, here's what we're trying to move it to, and then you're executing against that objective. So my team has a few objectives that overlap. I think, if there's anybody to look to, it's probably Instagram and Facebook for what's kind of the best way to do this, but you do need to adjust it to your unique situation as well. So this is just an example of an objective that we've done on our team where, activation is an issue that a lot of companies have, and if you can improve your activation rate, all channels work better. So if you focus on activation, and so say you've got a 15% sign up to usage conversion rate, setting a goal of a 45%. So we actually, these are not the exact numbers that we had, but we actually did set a goal of tripling our conversion rate from sign up to usage on our SaaS product, and my VP of engineering pushed back and said, that's impossible. 30 days to triple conversion rate, that's impossible, but 45 days is okay. So it's kind of like, well, it surprised me that 45 days was okay, but that same day, by quantifying this objective, that same day he went out and built a clickable prototype that he thought would solve the problem, and within about 2 weeks, we'd more than doubled our conversion rate, and we're on track to hitting that objective. So I think just quantifying it keeps people focused on what's important. Once you've set the objective, then you want to generate lots of ideas for achieving that objective. So you want to build those ideas in a way that really they're structured as an experiment doc. So the objective shows you what metric you're trying to move, but you want to build a hypothesis that explains why you think this experiment will move that metric. You want to include any research, any data that you say, particularly if you're solving a problem, like I talked about in the Log Me In example, that people didn't believe it was free. Once you know the problem you're solving for, your ideas are much more likely to work. So if you can include any of that research there, that's really important. And then just really try to tag it up and include like which lever are you focused on, which channel might it be focused on, because then when you have new objectives, even if that idea doesn't get run for that particular objective, you can go back later and tie it to a new objective if you've got enough information associated with it. The other thing we like to do is score it. So we've got this ICE score that we use, so impact, confidence, and ease. What we're trying to look at, it's not exact. Sometimes people get a little carried away in trying to be exact with the scoring of an idea, but just generally, does this seem like something that can be high impact and really move the needle in the business, or is it kind of minor? If it's kind of minor, but you're really confident it's going to work and it's super easy to do, then that's fine. That's probably a good one to do. So you're really trying to find things that are high impact, good confidence it'll work, pretty easy to run, and then I won't go into all the details, but we have a kind of a nomination process where people pitch the ideas, and then we narrow down to the ones we're going to run in a week, and we do that through this prioritization. So once you have the scoring, it becomes very easy to compare ideas, and then if you can compare ideas as they relate to an objective, it's easier to decide which ones you're going to run, and then you test those ideas. So you want to make sure you're using any tools like Optimizely or Visual Website Optimizer if you're doing funnel testing that just make it easier, because it's hard to run 3 tests per week, but some of the most highly impactful tests that we've run only took a few minutes to implement because we did it through Optimizely. And so whatever you can do to make it so that you can hit a higher testing frequency, you're going to learn a lot more about how to grow the business. And then finally, analyze. Figure out, did it work? Why did it work? Systematize it if it worked, and then organizing all of that information. So again, keeping everybody on the same page is really hard if the information is in someone's head, and I've suffered from that for a long time, where you go in and you say, we should try this, and people say, oh, we already tried it, but no one has the details on what was tried. So you want to document, capture that information so that people can actually look through and and find anything related to another objective that they're trying to accomplish. And it's really just about repeating that process, looking for leverage, repeating the process against objectives that apply to that leverage. So some of the key takeaways, and then we'll open it up some questions. So you've got to be very agile as a team. You've got to move fast, be deliberate about the objectives that you're setting, and that leads to sustainable growth in a much more effective way than just randomly doing a bunch of things or not testing at all is even a bigger problem for a lot of people. And if you have a weekly meeting where you can be very deliberate about, in this meeting, these are the objectives we're trying to accomplish. These are the things we're doing to accomplish those objectives. Here's the progress against those objectives. Here's our KPIs. The more that you can keep your cadence going in those weekly meetings, the more likely you'll be effective in driving your overall growth. So we'll open it up for some questions. Thank you. I don't know which one I'm going to try to read. So problem with getting old is you go blind. What's that? I see it down here, yeah. So can you give an example of a test you'd run in an average week? Is it 3 different experiments every week? So yeah, one thing that's important with these tests are that it's the number of tests launched that you have. It's not the number of tests that you can run only in a 1-week period. So some tests are going to need to run for a few weeks to get a statistically significant result. If it's going to take longer than a few weeks, then it's probably not in an area that's maybe high enough impact. This also includes tests that are channel tests. So you could be testing something new within Facebook. You could be testing a new creative, a new banner, a new landing page. So it's really, it's about having a hypothesis of why something you think is going to work, and then actually testing it. So one quick example. We had something that we scored a 4 for impact. So it was something that didn't seem like it was going to be a very good test, but it was so easy that we did it anyway. It was basically on growthhackers.com, moving an email collector that was at the bottom of the page. We said, let's move it to the top of the page. And that took like less than 10 minutes to implement, resulted in a 700% increase in emails collected. And then, before you rush out and move it to the top of the page, the next test we actually pinned it to the bottom, and it doubled it again. So instead of scrolling to the bottom, it then pinned to the bottom, and we put more design behind it. So that's an example of a type of test. How do you manage to keep track of 10 experiments per week and don't get overwhelmed by the data? Somebody's just planting that. So we actually have a product for managing tests. It's at projects.growthhackers.com. We have a demo booth downstairs if you'd like to see it. Thank you. How do I start designing my growth tech stack? Any resources or tips? I think there's a lot of conversation and discussion around it. So I would just talk to peers as a starting point. But it's really, to me, it's sort of quantitative, understanding what's going on. Qualitative, trying to understand why that's going on. So look at surveying, user testing. Usertesting.com is great, for example, there. And then quantitatively, good metrics. And then just like testing, facilitating products like Optimizely, so that you can run more tests. And then there's kind of channel-specific management products. But talk to other people. It's changing all the time. In mobile, it's going to be a different set of tools. And then how do I balance an experimentation mindset with a strategic mindset for non-quick decisions like product positioning and choosing a target market? So there's a lot of layers to that question. I personally like choosing positioning and the target market, and even like just what you should focus on in product. I like to start with my most passionate customers, so you can either figure those out quantitatively, what are the common themes of the people that you're retaining long term, or I actually do it qualitatively, where I run a survey. I ask, how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? I'm looking for people who would answer very disappointed. So that tells me it's a must-have for them. They love the product. And I'm trying to drill into what's the main benefit that they're focused on. So I'm going through kind of positioning around benefits. What are the profiles of those people? So, can I find a consistent targetable market? And what are the features that matter to them? Why is the benefit important? But I'm really studying everything I can about the most passionate customers. And I think it's kind of hard if you're in a startup where you have a natural inclination to solve problems, so you want to look at the ones that you're not getting. That's why you start a company in the first place. If you're solving a problem, you're likely pursuing a right type of opportunity. But this is the one area where it's less about finding the problem people and more about finding the really successful people and doubling down on the successful people, learning everything you can about them and trying to create more like them. How do I think I did that one. Can you elaborate on Twitter's 20 tests per week? Testing on what? So there's a great presentation that's online from the Agile Marketing Meetup. Satya Patel was the former VP of Product, and he didn't actually present that graph, but he said, I came in, they were only testing this, and then we moved to this, and I went and got the public data and put the two against each other, and was like, huh, yeah, it's kind of, so, but he goes into a lot more of the specifics on the types of things they were testing. Can you define what a good experiment is and what a bad experiment is? So I would say a good experiment is one that either succeeds or fails, but you have a clear hypothesis on what you think is going to happen. So I'll give you an example. We acquired a product called KISS Insights, changed the name to Qualaroo. We sold it maybe 6 or 8 months ago, but we acquired it on a total false assumption. So this assumption was they just needed to make the free product better, and this thing was going to grow like wildfire. So big bet. We acquired it, changed the freemium model on it to make it much more valuable, thinking that that was going to drive a lot more adoption. But we found out that once the free product got better, almost no increase in the adoption of the product. So you could call that a failed experiment, but it actually taught us something really important, which was our source of growth going forward. Taught us that there's a lot less price sensitivity on that category than we thought there was. So going forward, we doubled the price. Then we doubled the price again. Then we doubled the price again. And so a lot of our growth came through price doubling, and we added features along the way and extended what the product could do. But we learned that it was a pretty considered product for what someone was trying to accomplish. And so that failed test led to the insights that led to a lot more growth. How are we doing on time? Time for one more? Okay. And so I'm going to answer the other half of that. What's a bad experiment? Randomly doing it with no expectation about what's going to happen when I do it. Or maybe I think I'm going to do this, but I don't have any idea on why that's going to happen. What happens there is it's really hard to analyze if it was effective or not if you don't have a clear hypothesis. So what does the analyst do now? Do they check every single metric to see if it moved? That's really tough. So I would just say organizing as an experiment doc and being really deliberate about what you're trying to accomplish. As long as it leads to learning, it's a good experiment. When you run multiple experiments simultaneously, how do you know which one caused growth? That can be tough. It really, I try to isolate it to, I'm not going to run multiple A/B testing experiments on the same page, for example. And so if I'm only running one and I know my baseline metric and I know my the metric that's being improved, or which metric improved, then I can probably tie it back to that test, but there's noise. So if an article hit that same week and you got a lot more people coming in that are highly qualified, your overall conversion rate might go up. But if you're running it as an A/B test, then half the audience is getting the original version, half the audience is getting the new version. So it should normalize based on like a change in referring traffic. But it's, I think it's Conversion Excel is a really good blog that kind of goes into some of the best practices around testing, so conversionxl.com. So that's where I learn a lot of this. So I recommend checking that out. And that was the last question. Thanks, everyone.